I'm absolutely delighted to join you and to be in Hull, even if it's virtually. I had the pleasure of actually visiting Hull even before I came out to start my posting, hosted by the Wilberforce Institute, met the Freetown Society and the City Council, and found that hugely valuable. And sitting here in Sierra Leone, actually, the links that the UK and Sierra Leone have are very much underpinned by that dynamic Hull and Freetown link. So this is really going to be quite an exciting panel, and I'm sorry that I couldn't be here for the whole of the day. Um, so we've got a very strong, you've seen that the thrust of this is cultural partnerships and global learning. And we've got two really high quality speakers, and then we'll go into question and answers. So we will start off, first of all, with a very strong Sierra Leone voice in Barmmy Boy, who I know very well, an award winning and multi talented director. Founding member and actually current production manager of We Own TV Freetown Media Centre. He's a very good friend of the British Council and the British High Commission, and has actually won several awards. So have a look at the bio in detail. But given the thrust around human rights and how basic human rights sometimes are taken for granted, and the youth angle that's going to come through very strongly in this panel, I can't think of a better place to start than with Barmy Boy, who will be talking to us about child workers. So Barmy, without further ado, shall I hand over to you?
Yes, I am. Thank you very much. My name again is Mansaray, commonly called Barmy Boy. I am based in Freetown and Sierra Leone here. And over the last over 15 years, I have been making films and telling stories, but not only making films, using arts and music, whether it's photography, to talk about issues affecting us, to tell stories basically. And one of the things that we do at the Freetown Media Center is to enable young Sierra Leoneans or filmmakers to tell their own stories for themselves, stories about issues affecting them, in their in a community locally, or issues affecting all of us globally. And over the last 10 to 15 years, I have been playing a vital role helping to strengthen the link between Hull and Freetown, using music, using films to help kids and grown-ups from each side, to learn from each other, so we basically understand cultures and how we are connected in many ways. Over the course of my making films in Sierra Leone, I have made, tell many stories, from ranging from, music to Ebola to the mudslide and many more to count on the list. So films in general, it's a very powerful tool. Films in Sierra Leone for me, is very strong and powerful. I think personally, films is one of those tools that can be used to not only to educate but to help us connect, to each other. I remember when I started making films, it started because I had, this music that I wrote, and I noticed that if I want to tell, if I want people to understand my vision for the song, is to interpret this music visually, is to have a music video that goes with it, so people understand my message, people will get it, people will understand what I feel and what I want to get across. So that is how, my inspiration was born in telling stories. And back then, my music was basically focused on issues affecting me just after the civil war in Sierra Leone. Like many other young people, I was keen to talk about my issues affecting me in my society. Like many other young people that I was leading back then, I was leading what was called the Positive Music Project, and that project was used using guitar instead of gun. And I was leading, a group of young people, most of whom couldn't fit into communities and their societies after the war ended. So my job was to, to work with them to use music as kind of a getaway tool, but also on the back of it, also use, films and, music videos to help them explain and talk about these issues very strongly. So the two one of the films that we're going to see today is centered around, I mean, both of them obviously looks at the issue of child workers in Sierra Leone. So one is about kid miners, and the other, is seaside and borderland communities. So, during my time in Sierra Leone, growing up in Freetown, there is what we call in our local language men and Pekin is a form of a way to refer to like a child servant at home, and it mostly happens with families who couldn't take care of their kids, especially families like myself coming from families like that. One of the problems that we had, my dad, the house was so full that my dad couldn't take care of all of us together. So me wanting to go to school and wanting to do well, so I had to move into to another home, and I was there as what we call men pikin. And when you are men pikin in a home, you basically work for things. So you live in the home and they provide you shelter and they provide you something to eat, but then all the services that they provide for you and is tagged along things that you should accomplish. So for instance, you have to clean the house, or you have to fetch water in the morning before you go to school, and you have to basically go to the markets and do shopping before you can give you something to before you can get lunch. So these are some of the things that are tied around things that you have to do before you basically get what you need to eat, or where to sleep basically. So the culture of men picking is big, especially in the city, when you have families in the provinces that are basically, they have too much children, and they have families in the city that basically goes to these villages and these towns, and ask for these kids that they're going to send them to school when they come to the city, or they're going to look after them in many ways. So, but when they come to the city, they end up as men picking, most of whom we see on the street, like myself, selling cold water, selling plantain chips, and just fetching water, and whatnot. So that is kind of big, and it's happening. So you have in a lot of homes, you have those kids who are men picking. They basically work at home, and they get paid in food, or they're allowed to basically sleep in the house, and they're being assisted with some school fees, or basic necessities. So that is very common. But when I started making seaside and borderland communities, it was trying to understand um, some of the issues that children go through in seaside and in borderland communities. And throughout my filming, I meant to find out that because in Sierra Leone today, we have also fish is a big part of what we eat. 80% of the protein that we eat is fish, and it's one of those things that we have in abundance. And but one of the problems that we are facing quite recently is the influx of industrial scale fishing vessels, fishing boats in Sierra Leone that are disturbing local fishing communities. So my story was based around the largest artisanal fishing port in Sierra Leone called Tumbo, with over 620 boats, both fishing and transport boats, who are, it's basically, where most of the fish that comes to the local markets in Sierra Leone is where we get them from. So one of the big problems that these industrial scale fishing vessels and boats are causing for these communities is that they have, because they are fishing, they have bad method of fishing, and they are going into the protected areas and into the waters that these local fishermen are supposed to go into, and decimating most of what the local fishermen are supposed to get. It is causing serious social issues in these communities that is kind of affecting children. So one of the big problem in these communities is that a lot of the grown-ups, the dads, are leaving these communities, going into neighboring countries to seek for greener pastures. Leaving behind their children, their kids, leaving behind their wives. And most of them, when they leave these communities, they don't come back. They don't send to take care of their kids or their wives. They just leave these kids to roam around in these communities. And in turn, these kids become workers in these boats, in these local boats, because also you have a shortage in manpower on these boats because of these guys leaving and going to other countries. You have kids going on board these boats. And because these local boats need the requisite manpower to be able to pull this net off, to be able to fish, they encourage the kids. And so if you go to places like Tombo, and like many other fishing, ports around, local fishing ports around Sierra Leone, you find out that you have a lot of children working on these boats, working in these communities as help. So most of them not going to school. Most of them are trying to finding a living to look after their, to look after their siblings, our younger ones. Most of them are trying to assist their moms, their parents, really, who are left behind by their, by their husbands, going into other countries to look for greener pastures. And on the back of that film also, I was able to follow a bigger group of women living in a kind of a collective, who are like fishmongers, who are, who share the same stories. And most of them, in fact, one of them, when I was filming throughout, I filmed for like 3 years, in this community. And most of them, I witnessed them taking their kids, going into places like Conakry, to, in Guinea, and to, in fishing communities around Guinea, to look for their husbands, to get them to basically take care of these kids, so that they don't end up on the streets forever, really. So, and also, one of the other films that is Kid Miners, done by myself and my colleague, it reflects some of the realities that you find in, especially in the provinces, some of the realities that you see with families in these mining, communities, who mostly you have to, they have to get their kids to work, to mine, especially gold, to mine gold, so that they'll be able to get something. They'll be able to maybe also be able to pay for them to go to school and get some education. So the issue of child workers spans, in different areas, in different walks of life in Sierra Leone. But my film basically, looks at these two key areas: the mining and the fishing communities along Sierra Leone. Because myself, when I was a child, when I was growing up in Sierra Leone, I used to fish for a living, especially during the war and after the Civil War. It's one of those things that I did to survive. Sometimes when I go fishing, I will basically sell some of the fish, and I bring some home so that we can have something to eat, some protein for the day. So it's been a big part of my life growing up as a kid in seaside community that I grew up in, a place called Kokulbey in the city, like many other friends, like of mine, who we are all doing this same business, really, to survive. So I think at the end of the day, also for me, it was about survival. It was about putting food on the table. Not caring much about the consequences as a child. Even I know that my mom cared a lot about what I was doing and how I was, because I was only 11 years old actually when I left home and start finding for myself and helping my mom, even in time of when my dad was in prison for a long time. So I had to step up as a child to make sure I help, my mom, and that is kind of what is happening for a lot of families, a lot of children around Sierra Leone, not only in Freetown. I grew up in Freetown, and then I'm based in Freetown, so I have 6 sisters and 2 more brothers from a really big family. Yeah. So yeah, briefly, that is from me, looking at my film, and what I do. And I believe, like I mentioned earlier, I believe that film can be used as a powerful tool to express oneself. When I was doing some work in schools in Holland and Freetown, one of the ways that I get these kids to understand each other better than what they will find on YouTube is to make schools, for especially the link schools. These link schools in Freetown and Hull was to make film, for instance, in Dorchester or Inns Primary, or Sutton Park, and primary, and many other schools that I've done film and music project. These film and music projects help these kids to understand each other properly, and better, and also to relate and understand our lives and how we are all connected, and some of the things that we're going through in life. So I think in strengthening link, in bridging the divide, I think films are really important, important to help us make informed decisions as to how how we navigate, or how we help to remedy, or how we help to mitigate some of the issues affecting children, not only in Sierra Leone, but both in Freetown and in Holland, across the world, really.
My name is Teka Conte, born of Koya. Born the way they are, so I'm your first boy picking down there. So right now, I get them 4. I know the big one. Don't call the train. So right now, we are miner, and I go mine with the mine. So now they will the cool we live, now they will do all things. Now they in sport, brother they go school. So I did me goal. Now from there, I pay down in school fees. This side we say we work so. Now we call wire off. We can we trip. We meet the gravel, we pull on, wasa, we go down to the post where they buy, we buy, and the money they take now, a give it, and they go back, they leave now, they take that money there now. What we get for do, we do with that money there. One day, 9 kilo near the machine, 9 they operate that machine there for we. If not, they will see, right now, we're not going to do this mining work because we're not going to bail. That machine, and they bail, they attack for we. So, do clear car, sometimes they rate, if me not the fit fire, they tell us, I say, take the rope, we start the machine bail, after the water, after the machine don't bail the water, we in the snap and blind now. So inside self is sabi was, so they take that one pan, go to a river, go was. They can't show with the gold. After that, the person not there now, what continue pan the line. The whole blind now, we pass the gravel.
Kuruma from Waya village. Na coal miner they do. Mama say I'm 13 years this. Why make the not put me in school? They not get money. Na tala Kuruma to school Kuruma and then put na school my small brother. Papa with me mama and then they force me then say la go. Now make me I they go where I go now. What are they get? Na then they would eat. Where I go my Waya village, I dey pass water, I go, I pass water back, we say then stick then dey. Where I reach, I dig the dirty, I cut on the side, I wash am. Where I wash am now, if I see, I put up on the sample pan. If I not see, I dey go put some pan and back. Where we don't dig, we chair the lapa, we put that coal. If you just dey, they will come. We dey find around Sunday, we know the seller, we dey keep am. This school was sweet today in small, we not see. Pass tomorrow now, we put some pan, we can sell am. Work out and mama then they go sell am. Sometimes 20,000, sometimes 25,000, sometimes 15,000, and then they get.
Titi na the only, na me first girl picking, easy. See the second one the learner, class 3. Titi been the first na school with this. I'm big for this. But as he say, that time the mama been the strain, I make I pull on a school.
Joe.
So in the bondi, in small one and did it. That way in call beer in the good school right now because right now I not get. So now make I put that one in our school first. But them can read. Why I can tell them for say let can work. Instead of the choose in face, he say party there no one go. Instead of I go school, but they encourage them because of I not get. So we can aside to can work. But for saying about you not get one problem. For saying no more person no unfair now. No, not the unfair person. Moralo, I can tell I say right now, I no get. If I myself get a chance, I say this boy, I say I know the grill if I mean I mind. I say, boy, now chance not the name. They tell you boss say, let patient with me. Say until God will make I succeed.
Where I go, how they wound, then back I they cut to say, I they cut myself. Where I snap and the attack, God they hold me, God they catch me.
In this case, child trafficking, child labor, the key in other communities they are, especially the borderline community, the rural community. People that can come out, go upline, go take picking, counter, say for capital school. But we come, now different thing, we can do start picking in. So now upon all the things in there, we can discuss this morning. And also, we want to do contribution.
Inside the Child Rights Act, we say, purpose not 18 years old, we always say, like we say, na pikin. And the government law, they tell you say, if you're 18 years old, you're not pikin. Something will really happen to you, you know it's time for talk. Well, yeah, before we will talk. Nothing will talk. When you talk the experience, now one of the great things you will ever get. We talk about we can't change that person, we will ever reach that salary or reach. And that's me, when they tell story, and whenever I want to watch you say, you know, so we want to have an open discussion.
Hello. My name is Leonean. Me, I love me man commerce. I go sell this was the money loss is a pass I go sell that money, the accounts are. They are not very hard for go sell that money. They mad go me home. They say, well, NCC stand on the game. Can't see also. Then, time to time, remember, you know, me party. I say, Lilian, where they party, I get party. Kalogo, Skito, myself, I come, me correct me. Mama no get, me papa no get. The way they do, no get again. Na mi story that they elect today. I never put that story that they sent to me by them. Because I know the pain now they feel.
Like when they happen so, if the one that when they don't start up, they will not cut them off. The one that when they grow up, they will can't join the same. And you know what fine for let it be so.
I be there to a woman where they cook cookery. Now maybe they was spam for her. So time carry and do my back. You don't boy picking. The one can make for me that way. They myself. I don't lie. I take the money myself. I can't Freetown. I say because it's me. You don't boy picking it's in a dose. If mama know they go to market, go all men to get that. Me now I not agree. They fed me myself. One day when mama go na market the money when left me and I take I can't Freetown. So that street I don't left so say that I don't carry. I did that street still. When that street come on work, how to get to sustain my life.
So my party, when we all in our house, they say auntie they na turn. We try my friend transport, make we can not turn. So I direct na friend the transport, me na can't turn. Going back, I to extra posting day. Now do my cookery they sell. We don't was spam for our when it reach, and if we go fair no side for sleep. So they go meet on some boys there. They use it and they pay back. When you talk back, then beat you back and then they. don't deal see beat na treat. Like me, they don't deal beat me. Not say you show it just car. They see all kind disadvantage by you.
Now next time we go the guests to go there. Apart to the go na Chinese man we go to. Because me could not get living. Then me could say for the jump at the boats there go find money come. So I will go the Chinese man back. We not sabi talk the Chinese language. Then I did talk for we. They sabi. Some they sabi. We don't talk and I will not know. We dey do the money now. I mean the boat stand. I mean do the water and they pin me. After that, if we not give the money, they say pass to pull our money. They will give them before they count sweet. Now the dry land. We had my experience. We make a left for going to school because they see picking the way they small where they not pull Bobby itself. They not even pull Bobby. Then at the breast, they take their care. They go to school. They pick it about quant money, so they say they go. Any amount they give them, they all like the cap they son they know they go na they come on the water they go na the club where Kalana bien they take the pick they go stay. Don't see and they know. You see the big one that they kid they not kid no. Now the Chinese man where they want woman, when they say they want woman, they call everybody where they get boats and they take their care they go. That time they some of them now the big one and then they na boats again. Now they so kill left there. So now that time they get chance for do that thing then. Because you know say if big one day they not go able to do that thing then.
No, the area is so populated. You, the chief, you know we will take the mandate for go check host to host. Big man as a chief. You know go see bad things that happen. We give reports. Whether reports again for taking action. They say na the chief, na the chief. So you go sit down. So if that's be the happen, they keep a secret, it will fine. So if now they ask me, then they will stand firm for her for try say this year, lay abon at this community.
Boats where they apply in this community, about 500 boats, including 38 transport boats. Fishing boats and transport boats, about 500 where they apply.
This type fishing community where the principal livelihood, where people then depend on through the fishing. But today that fishing they don't get some amount of problems and we they able to address the needs of the people that again inside the community. So the CC like we talk about street child, they will get lots of them here with some down there for the past 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years. Now you go to the police station, they will confirm that to you for say the crime rate every day it increase as a result of within the source of livelihood about them will get for what itself, they lucrative again as even they trade.
Chinkichonka na foreigners there in the do na this country na then Koreans and then Chinese there also. Where to me na a very big dismay and to the organization itself and to the entire fishermen na this country. The way that they do the fishing is bad and the type of fish that they buy catch when they catch is completely dangerous where it for damage the ecosystem completely. And since the time now where Chinkichonka don't come, then at this we land where they don't begin fishing. Now from that we don't begin experience this absolute shortage of fish from fishers in this community. We don't inform the government, not to one, not to two. The past government, we don't inform them, even this present one. I tell them, I say, hey, trouble they happen as you. Now tell them address her because when I get the authority at hand, this Navy man they waiting from our command they take. I say, if we not address them, the future of resources, get for fans. So that one day is crystal clear for say we don't get information over and over. And here is the situation. We say some boat then they because of this way where fishing on day, they don't get enough man power again. So any side then go anybody will come on the boat for say they go fishing they ready for accommodate them. So you go see on the HPK we not do for go fishing business. Then they jump at them boats here so they fishing where they can't end up for staying at Tumbiasu. That one is very common now. All the island there.
Them boku they come up planting. Then all sides of this country then they come where she come you don't left. Because Tumbu is a free place. Boats and they count picking there, then they left now. Motoka they count them, then they left now. Pampa they count them, then they left now. But hey, if you go them paper off, you go even now we now. Just people now if you go see them park day.
Sunday we don't gonna see at the dog cock or lead, or if I not dog cock or a bell water. After we don't bill, we can land. If we fishing, they give me small fish. I go to meals. Someday I can work 3 times for day at the boats there. I can slack my boats. If they ever load machine load, I go take the tank I can pin. If say I go do the hang, I go do the hang, I'll come on. Or come back. If you not fishing, I baby water, I left the boat at Sanda. I go try by the hang rope. Or we go na house. When let's come back around 2 o'clock, we can. I can't baby water. So I don't fishing. Beaucoup pass la cassade des boats là. We don't go na Guinea, Yellow Boya, campsite. We don't go all inside there. We don't go fishing. Good fish there. Maybe a big man business and say they beat you. And say what we call you. Not so you say they go see.
Then if we talk again about the migration, most of them picking the way they serve as street picking inside the community, now their mama and their daddy them born them. But because of this illegal fishing they talk about on Tranga, people then they migrate from here, then they go Guinea. Left the woman with 3, 4, 5 picking them. Whether woman able get source for get money for take care of them picking in the. So at the end of them picking day, then go become street picking them because the mommy not able for take care of them. So if one for do that, let we come put us together. Let me see how they will address this issue of fishing. Now, very recently, everybody saga the way they happen at Kuwait. People in America, they know say Tumbu na a very loose community where can take good number of women there, boy picking the asso. You understand? Take the then go down all now human trafficking. At the end of the day, end up or go cause they say, hey, the condition of the Facebook who come from there is not good. So fishing community and then send them very common day. So if they ask for child labor and child trafficking, it's very, very rampant in this community.
So with a beg planning, like Papa could try this thinking chunka like common at this country. Not able to pay for picking them. You're not able to support you all. But anyway, if they see then the fishing, we go help them. Who's going to help for helping now with the maintenance?
What did they make them problem this 12 months and sensitization? Government for saying rep them to people or to the stakeholders, come to meetings and with bylaws. All that today will stop them to the small fishing community. Go to communities, put them bylaws in there with empowerment the community. If now the fishing side, the abo masters, the headmans, they're all there for empowerment. Put some young people they see. That picking the men no go na see again. Hey, that guy picking. Because we they do a move, but we not able. We try.
Well, like the strategy we have for put in place for address them problem they also for be community-led strategies them. Because to make a trust for be community-led strategies them, this now we it directly affect. Now we bargain for come up with the solutions them. We will see this solution it will be applicable for level apply and for level we go able for address the solutions they also.
So much for that, Barmmy. Those 2 films, hugely sobering, difficult to watch, I'm sure, for many of us. A very hard-hitting look into how the issues that children go through and how wider issues and socio-economic challenges end up impacting the most vulnerable, and children obviously as part of that. And one of the messages I think I'm taking away there is very much that idea of a community-led or whole of society approach to solving some of these issues. Now I'm convinced that there will be many questions for you, but what I'm going to do, if it's okay with everybody, is let's go next to our next speaker, and then Barmmy, we will come back on questions for you both. So we've just touched on through Barmy's films and his speech at the minute. We've heard a lot about when children don't have agency or they don't have a voice, and they're the brunt of very difficult choices. Let's now turn to the idea of global partnerships and pupil agency. And I can see we've got Paul Browning in the room, who I met on my my trip to Hull, who was then head of Stepney Primary School. And I can't think of a better person to lead this next part of the session. So Paul is now in the Thrive Cooperation Trust, heading pupil engagement and development. He's been the lead on that since January 2022. Before that, in Stepney, where I met him, in the same trust since 2006. Having joined that school as a deputy head and worked in other schools in Hull and East Riding, and has a very keen interest in children developing their talents, absolutely passionate about the impact that young people can make, and very passionate about the youth voice. And I was absolutely delighted to be part of the International Pupil Council that he and Francis Mason set up. And Barry knows well, again, another link between Hull and Freetown that helps children learn from each other as well. So look, without further ado, Paul, can we hand over to you? And then if we've got time, I think we're finishing around 15:10, but perhaps Nick or Claire can pop in the chat bar if we've got a bit more time. After your presentation, we'll go to questions for both of our speakers. Over to you now, Paul.
Thank you, Lisa. So it's great to be here. Again, Steve Barmmy Boy. The first time I was in Sierra Leone and met Barmmy Boy was on a beach in 2010, Beach 2, absolutely glorious beach in Freetown. So I'll explain. Lisa's explained to you. I have just finished being a head teacher at Stepney Primary School. 15 years, but my engagement with the global perspective, I think, began in 2010. I'm talking today about a bit about our global involvement, but also I'm going on to a sense of pupil agency, which you may or may not have heard about before, which I'll explain about where we are with that as we go through. So a little bit of history. I have used this slide before. I hasten to add, I'm not Josh Guthrie. I'm not. I'm 6'1", but not quite 6'4" American football player. Josh is. I've got more wacky hair than Josh has, I think. But, so I have used some of these slides before. So a lot of this, the history of Freetown and involvement in Hull, you will know about. But it's a long history, a history that I haven't been part of per se, because I come from the Midlands and I came up here in 1990. But it's quite poignant for me, especially being in the Wilberforce Institute for Slavery, because since I've become involved in this, perhaps part of why I'm here is because of my own family history of slavery. My 4 times great-grandma was a lady called Rose, who was a black African slave on the island of Martinique. Obviously my 4 times grandfather was a soldier in the British Army who came back, and we don't know the full story, so it's not one perhaps to be proud of, but it's part of my ancestry. With a son, which was because of the relationship with Rose, who was a slave on Martinique. So I feel now more emotionally involved with all this than I was before. But so 2010, I can't take all the credit for this, because this wonderful woman here who's sitting there, Kathleen, has been mightily involved in all of this. But back in 2010, the reciprocal visit we had to Freetown, Francis Mason, who many of you may know, who's absolutely inspirational person, absolutely a god. And he came back to our school, and he happened to have been showing him around our Victorian school, built in 1886. And that's been educating children all the way since then. And one of the displays was similar to this one. It was on this board, but a bit different. It showed that our children were part of a school council, part of the whole youth parliament, and in those days we were split up into different areas in Hull, and we were part of the Wyke area. And there's the Wyke area council where different church schools send their children to be part of the committee. So children had a voice. And for us, it said, and of course this was like 2010, you know, so not many years, 11 years after the, 9 years after the Civil War was finished. And he said children in Sierra Leone have no voice. And I know when we joined with Lisa a little while ago, when she joined us in the IPC meeting, that she said children in Sierra Leone still have no voice. And looking at Barmmy is quite emotional films. You can see it's even less than having a voice, isn't it? It really is quite emotionally draining seeing something like that. But anyway, so Francis and I said, right, let's do something about this. Let's give some voice to children, and let's start this global journey. And I started off for a few years, and I must say, Kathleen must take credit for a lot of it, because she's steered this ship, the International Pupil Council, over many waters since then, and they've been absolutely inspirational. So although she's stepped down from the helm, I'm glad to take over from, oh, it's hard to step in the footsteps. This is my experience back in 2010. We've recently been on some holidays to the Caribbean, and my first family holidays. My first thoughts were, oh, the climate, the fauna is very similar to the Caribbean. Very different, completely very different. You know, it's obviously the difference between a very sort of tourism place, which is very developed in the Caribbean, compared with a developing country, which I've never been to. It's, you know, people think, oh, teachers are going on these jollies or these little holidays to Sierra Leone. Wow, how wrong can they be? It's an experience, a life-changing experience. I've been unfortunate not to have been back since then. I'm desperate to get back at some point, I can tell. But I have managed to send some of my teachers there, which is great, because it's one thing coming back and telling stories about it. You can only get a full picture if you go and visit somewhere like Sierra Leone. This is a welcome I've got everywhere, and you get everywhere you go in Freetown. Lovely smiley faces. We've had a football match here. I've taken some footballs over because the children, their notion of football was some plastic bags wrapped up in lots of elastic bands. So to have some footballs was quite thing. I took white shirts, and my wife despaired when we got home because of the colour of that clay. I should have asked if anyone would be willing to wash them in Sierra Leone, because they can get their clothes brilliantly white without Perth or Dazzle or washing machines and stuff. It's just like, you just learn so much about different people and different lives. It's amazing. Since then, we've sent some children over. That was ICOP's school. We changed school for different reasons, and this is Adeline, where they've just celebrated a decade of the school, and they've come on leaps and bounds. We did our little a bit. Diane and Kay, who were two of the teachers who went over there, took a load of reading resources, helped them to show them ways we do things. It certainly is not a case of us going over there and telling us how Freetowners should do it. We go over there and share our experiences, and they come to us and share their experiences, and so that's how it should be, reciprocal sort of arrangement. We certainly learn a lot from those people, and hopefully they learn some from us as well. Again, this is one of my teachers, my foundation stage teacher, Kay, doing some reading, taking some of our picture books. And this is a reciprocal visit back in our country as well. So we've got British Council involved there, taking some videos of the experience. So this is something that we're desperate for, and that is for the global partnerships to restart. It's all COVID related, it's all the funding related to the British Council, so we're fingers crossed all the time that that's going to start again. We meet every half term, International Pupil Council meetings. One of the nice things we can do is we can have like Anglo-Sierra Leonean football tournaments on 6-a-side. So being on the same timeline as Sierra Leone, it means we can have our matches in here just at exactly the same time as they're having in Sierra Leone. So that's pretty cool. That is pretty cool. And so we know Sierra Leoneans love their sport and their football. So this is a meeting of the IPC that we had. This was the last time our friends and colleagues from Freetown were able to come over and join us. And this is in primary school, so there's lots of breakout groups and chances for our children to learn about teachers, learn about schools in Freetown from their teachers. And this is a very recent one. One of the positives, I suppose, of COVID is we've got to grips quite quickly with remote learning. And it's amazing, I think, that we can connect with Lisa. We connected with her today. We connected with her a few weeks ago. I don't know what, I don't usually bump into High Commissioners on a day-to-day basis. I think this is the only High Commissioner I've ever met. But if any of them are as half as good as Lisa is, then they certainly are worth the wait. So here's Lisa talking to. This is the first meeting, I should add, in person after COVID. So after 2 years of remote learning and all that sort of stuff, which it doesn't really work well with children. If you find to remote teach, children need to be in classes. You know, they need to be with their friends and outside playing and inside learning. They need all that. But one of the things that Kathleen introduced to the IPC was the idea of using the Sustainable Development Goals as the focus of what we're doing. Sure, when we started in 2010, there were lots of things which jumped out at us, like recycling is always a good one because kids can really feel that they can be involved in that. But the Sustainable Development Goals have really been a focus for this. So Kathleen introduced this, and so each meeting or each term we focus on a different aspect of that, whether it is recycling or life below water, and sort of plastic in the oceans is obviously a massive one. And it has reflected what we've done in schools, reducing how much plastic we use, to get rid of the plastic which is thrown away at lunchtimes, that sort of thing. It's making children more aware. And a lot of the things that we teach children at school, it can be, you know, they don't particularly have ownership for it as much. It might be quite distant learning. Learning about the history of this. I mean, I love history, but things that children are passionate about are things that are connected with their world. So they are passionate about global. It's not something that is just foisted on them by adults. It's something that they are really proud of, and they want to make an impact of. And the Sustainable Development Goals are a brilliant focus for this. And we have done some really good things, haven't we, Kathleen? Well, we all traipsed down to St Stephen's Quay, St Stephen's Shopping Centre, and with clothes made out of recycled crisp packets and all sorts of stuff, which was part of the big competition. we did a catwalk there. And then the children went off with surveys and harangued, nicely and politely, but harangued shoppers about their ideas about recycling as well. So that's really hands-on. That was really good stuff to do and good fun as well. And it's making it varied. And it's these sorts of things that, as adults, you remember more. When you were a child, I remember making cottage loaves with Mrs. Davis when I was at middle school. But I can't remember the maths and English she taught me. She must have taught me. But I remember making bread with her. And so these sorts of things really stick in your mind. And hopefully, if you stick in your mind that you were involved in a recycling catwalk, that's going to have a bearing on perhaps what you might want to do with your lives. We've had some, as I mentioned before, when our colleagues in Freetown come over, it's about sharing ideas. This was a teacher's workshop that we did at the Hull History Centre, just round the corner from here. We also, as part of that visit, we traipsed on down to the Deep and had a really good session there with them talking about plastic in the oceans. And we have lots of fun as well. So it's lovely sampling their cuisine and their nightlives, and we sampling and then they sampling ours as well. I think the most frightening and funny and exhilarating experience I had when I went to Freetown was in those days when Hull City was still in the Premier League. Now, bearing in mind that the Freetonians, that is the word, like the big four, like the Manchester United and the Arsenal and Liverpool, not that keen on Hull City. It happened to be an Arsenal-Hull City match, and I was with Matt Stevenson and there's three of us who went to this bar, a massive, great big bar. We were the only three English blokes in the bar. We were the only three white men in the bar. The rest were Sierra Leoneans. It was 1-1. They were all Arsenal fans, 3 Hull City fans. And it got to 1-1, and into extra time, Arsenal scored. The place erupted. There were chairs flying over, tables flying over. I think, oh my God, and the final whistle went. The landlord switched the TV off, and everything was put back sedately in its place, and everyone filed out, and the three of us just sat there thinking, that wouldn't happen in England, would it? So lots of good fun, but we've done lots of great work with them. Yeah, we might have green fields in some of our schools, but some of our schools don't actually. St George Primary School, Escort Primary School in Hull have not got a blade of grass amongst them. But that notwithstanding, we can do exactly the same things in Hull. We can plant potatoes in bags, and in fact, this is where we learn from our friends in Freetown, because they're more creative and innovative than we are, and show us how you can grow things in all sorts of conditions and situations. So do lots of good things like that. And here, so I'll flick through some of them because I'm aware of the time. But again, this is as we've been talking about the Sustainable Development Goals in Hull. Francis has been doing the same with workshops in Freetown. So there's a really strong connection. I think if you went around the country, you'd find lots of schools in lots of different cities and counties twinned with different schools in different countries. But I don't think there can be any two cities which are strongly bonded as Hull and Freetown. Maybe there are, but I mean, when you're thinking how many schools, it's not just one or two schools. It's a city, it's two cities which are really closely linked. So it's great. But we've moved on from there to this idea of agency. I mentioned it all started in 2010 with Francis saying, well, children in Sierra Leone do not have a voice. Well, they have a voice, but how much of a voice do they have? This is where we're looking at pupil or student agency. So you may or may not have heard about what this is. Our site's a bit small. But the OECD have done some definitions on it. I'll read these if I may. So student agency implies a sense of responsibility as students participate in society. So participate in society. And aim to influence people, events and circumstances for the better. So that is like proactivity for young people. Agency requires the ability to frame a guiding purpose and then identify actions to achieve a goal. So, in layman's terms, I suppose, it's about acting rather than being acted upon, shaping rather than being shaped, and making responsible decisions and choices rather than accepting those determined by others. And there are different scales. I don't think I've got one on this PowerPoint, but if you consider like the Victorian ethos of children should be seen and not heard, they don't have a voice at all. And again, as we see in sort of Sierra Leone, I guess that applies. In fact, it's worse, isn't it? Victorian times, we talk about child labour. Child labour is still going on in this world in the 21st century, so that's not great. So if you start at the bottom of that, if that's on the bottom of a ladder, and increasingly you're going up this ladder, you've still got adult-initiated ideas. So a lot of teaching in schools, I guess, is adult-initiated ideas. The curriculum is adult-initiated. Yes, children need to know that knowledge. We did that as children ourselves, so that's helped us to develop and get the jobs we want to and influence the world. But there's lots of things that could be child-initiated. So the idea of growing sense of pupil agency is pupils having all this acting rather than being acted upon, shaping rather than being shaped, being more responsible for making decisions and their actions. So again, just a couple more quotes. Student agency is not a personality trait, it's something malleable and learnable. The term student agency is often mistakenly used as a synonym for student autonomy, voice or student choice, but it's much more than these concepts. So acting autonomously does not mean functioning in social isolation, nor does it mean acting solely in self-interest. And similarly, student agency doesn't mean that students can voice whatever they want to or choose whatever subjects they can do. Some schools in America have really pushed the boundaries for pupil agency. So it's almost like some schools you might think they might get to that sort of 60s sort of hippie commune type thing, maybe. But there have to be limits within this. There has to be a structure. In our trust, which is called the Thrive Trust, it's made up of 9 schools, 2 of which are secondaries, Calvin Hall and Newland School for Girls, an all-girls school, and then 7 primary schools. So we're thinking about moving on from this voice, and we're thinking, how can we measure this? How can we see where we are now, and then how can we move forward? And we thought, rather than just, and this sounds quite interesting, so rather than just do it in isolation, let's see if we can have some academic links. So we managed to come across a lady called Dr. Jill Hughes at the education department, and when we looked at Jill's profile, after someone had suggested her names, as well as pupil agency, we looked down and words like global partnerships and Sierra Leone started popping up, and the links are all there. Jill and some of her staff, Tricia Shaw at the university, have suggested that one of the people who started to look at pupil agency is a professor at Belfast University, Queen's University Belfast, called Laura Lundy, and she's prepared a model. So this is where we are, almost where we are at the moment. We're on the start of this journey in our trust, in terms of we're building more agency. So there's 4 elements that Laura Lundy say are part of her pupil agency model. So you start with space, and then you move to voice, and then you move to audience, and then you move to influence. And it all ties in with the this Article 12. So space, children must be given safe, inclusive opportunities to form and express their views. So space doesn't mean just like providing a room, it's sort of providing the opportunities and the time as well as the space. And then the voice, children must be facilitated to express their view. Well, how? There's different ways of doing it. There's a quantitative one, which people like Ofsted like, where they're sending out a survey and sort of 8 out of 10 cat owners say their cat prefer pedigrees or whatever. It's that sort of thing, but that's not really delving down into it. It's giving you an idea of where you are. That's where we started. We have done one of those surveys based on ideas to connect with pupil agency to sort of find where children are, to find out which of these areas might be strongest. But we're going to move on to a more qualitative phase where it's all about sitting with young people and finding out what their views are. And then we go into the audience. And again, with children, it's not just a case of them having their voice, but it's knowing that their voice is being heard. And also, as we move into influence, heard by the right people who are going to be able to do actions to make their ideas come through and then to feed back to them. So it's not just a case of, yeah, we mentioned it in a school committee or school pupil council, but we're not sure what happened to it after that. We're not sure what happened after that. It's seeing the results of that, which we want to do. And then this all links in with the Sustainable Development Goals. It links into the IPC again, because that is about children having a say. It's their world just as much as it's our world. We're handing it on to them. So the Centre Pupil Agency is children actually saying, we want to change this about our environment. So it's really exciting to do this, and it's exciting when you come across little elements of this which are already happening. So I had an invite yesterday to Kingston Youth Centre. Haven't had a chance to put it on here because it literally last night. It was not the mayor of Hull, because of the Law Mayor, but the Hull's young mayor, who she is a student at St Mary's College, and with some of her colleagues as well. They're speaking out about racism and microaggression in schools. I didn't really know what microaggression was until I got there last night. In a sort of layman's terms, they were explaining that microaggression is you might have someone say a comment about you on a day, so once a day, and that might be at the end of it. They might not say it again to you, but it might resonate with you, it might stick in you. It's almost like a mosquito stinging you. And all of us have experienced this. I can remember when so-and-so said that to me. But what they're explaining is, for some people, that microaggression happens not just say once in a blue moon, but on a daily basis and frequently. It's almost like getting multiple mosquito stings on a daily basis. So for them, experiencing that's something that they think schools aren't doing enough about. So they're taking it on board and they want to see some action. So I got dragged in because part of my job is writing policies and sorting out policies. And they said, well, we want an anti-racism policy. Oh yes, said I. We have an equality and inclusion policy in most schools. Yes, but we don't think that's going far enough. Okay, so wow, yeah, okay, yeah. And again, it's making sure that it's not going to be something that I initiate and they tag along with. It's definitely being initiated by the young mayor of Hull, which is absolutely fantastic. I don't know how many cities have young mayors, but right. So, thank you. Thanks very much.